This is an open letter for Mrs. Tulsi Gabbard. Hello, sir. Hello, ma'am. How are you? Hope everything is fine. Here's the thing, ma'am. I read in the news that we read in the news that you have basically saying that this having this no-fly list and watch list for air travel and watch list that the for here and there and the other, we don't need these watch lists. Well, although I believe I probably could be in those on some of those watch lists, but I think it's a good idea to keep them. The watch list that I think I may be on some of them. Salute. The watch list that I think I may be on some of them. I don't think you should take it away. Any of them. In fact, you should add more watch lists. And yes, it's going to be a police state. I do admit that what I'm advocating is a police state. You need more watch lists, not less. And I'm not for police state, but I am advocating for police state. Why? It's because of your previous policy. You see, because of your previous policy. You see, watch lists was a solution to a problem that you had created yourself. You're continuing to create yourself. The problem is the expansion of the empire. That's a solution to your capitalism. You see, that's expansion of the empire is one of the, if you want to go back, see where this police state comes from, where it starts, that I'm advocating that. What I'm saying is, as long as your policies are such, then you have to continue holding up the police state and even making it more restrictive. Here's how it starts. Big money wants more profit. Instead of 0.5% growth a year, big money wants 20% growth a year, so they can show something in the Wall Street and all congratulate each other and give each other bonuses. To do that, they have to, for those bonuses, for extra money, wealth, greed, for that, they need to keep expanding their money supply. For that, they need to keep expanding the empire. Expansion of NATO, expansion of white people in West Asia, Israel, white settlement in West Asia, expansion of the white settlement in West Asia, which is called Israel. That's literal expansion. You're trying to expand your these money that are hoping for 20% return. That means they have to expand the empire and exploit more of its resources and markets in order to justify their bonuses, their increase in wealth. So, in order to have old idea, in order to have more money, you have to continuously expand and exploit your empire, and to do that, you have to be continuously on the attack. I.e., put military bases in Saudi Arabia and put military bases in Syria, and whoever who doesn't agree with your military bases, start shooting at them. Put military bases in Ukraine, and if the Russians or Russian speakers or anyway, whatever the fuck is happening, if those who don't agree with your influence, with your bases, because I guess you're right, you're on the right side, you're for freedom and democracy. Man, freedom is very cultural. It's not something that, freedom is not universal. You don't have a universal definition of freedom. A cage, a prison yard to a prison who's locked up 23 hours a day, that 1 hour for that prison is considered as freedom. While Jeffrey Epstein and his pals need an island offshore to feel free enough to do what they desire, offshore. You see what I'm saying? That is freedom to these people who can afford to have a private island, or who can afford to have a friend who has a private island. That's freedom for them. And the prisoner who's locked up 23 hours a day, that 1 hour of yard time, that's freedom to him. So there's no universal definition. So what you consider as freedom, women's freedom in downtown New York City, is not, and let's say Manhattan, women's freedom, what is defined, how women is considered as free in Manhattan, is not exactly how it's defined on the mountaintops of Afghanistan. You define freedom for women in one way, they define freedom for women in another way, because that's just the result of your surroundings. A woman in miniskirt in Afghanistan is going to is going to be molested every minute that she's outside the house. So what kind of freedom you want her to have? To be molested? Because, this is what, at the mountaintops of Afghanistan, this is not traditional enough for them. This is whorish as far as they're concerned. So please don't give me women's rights, freedom, this freedom, that. Freedom is not equally defined. And democracy is just the Greek and the Romans came up with the idea that every citizen has enough brains that they can they can choose who should be their leader. No, every citizen doesn't have enough brain, especially if your citizens are there is 350 million in your tribe. How 350 million can ever, organize in such a way that they find the best of them? Are you fucking kidding me? Maybe 20 people can find the best of them. 50 people, a 50-member tribe can find the best of them. Anything over 1,000, it's a 50-50. They can find their best, or the best one with the best politics and a more political guy, a better salesman. So usually from the best of them, they end up with the best in democracy. The problem that the Greek-Roman system is, I'm not advocating for monarchy here. I'm not doing that, because that's a different shit show. That, again, that's another 50-50 chance whether the inheritor of the crown is going to be worthy or not. That's, again, another 50-50 chance. But this democracy has also turned into a 50-50 chance, or even worse, 80-20 chance, that you get a good salesman. Not the best of them, not the best of the tribe, but just a good salesman. A great salesman. Salute. And that's what you have had, a series of great salesmen for the past 100 years in Uncle Sam's land. As chief of the tribe. A great salesman as a chief of the tribe. Therefore, again, why money wants a substantial return on it. The Wall Street needs a substantial return on their investment, and the only way to do that is to continuously expand the empire and exploit the empire. And to do that, you need to continuously be on the offensive to grab more land and resources and populations. Therefore, NATO expanding, and white people are expanding in West Asia, and Western white people are expanding in Eastern Europe, want to expand in Eastern Europe, bring Ukraine into NATO and freedom. This is exactly what happened in Korea, in which you went in and you put a series of generals in charge of Korea, and who would agree with you to fight the other natives. Again, the Ukrainians are fighting the other natives, and the only difference is Ukrainians agree with you. You like Ukraine, you're in bed with Ukrainian. Because the other side are the Russian population. Anyway, my point is this, Mrs. Tulsi Gabbard. as long as you are on the offensive in the empire, you're literally funding and arming one of the sides in 2 wars, and you're hoping to start one over Ukraine in 3 wars. So you're continuously, for many years, a few years now, you've been supplying 2 really big wars by money and arms. A lot of the natives over there who are being, these wars are being fought with them and against them, those Ukrainians who are being pulled into vans in order to be forced to the front line, they're forced into the shit show. And the Russians who are scared shitless because they were attacked in 2014 by the Ukrainian population. The Russian population of Ukraine were attacked in around there, started being attacked 2014, 15, 16, started being attacked by the Ukrainian population of Ukraine. So they're scared shitless. The other Russians have come in to help, but you're supplying the other side. Exactly the same thing happened with South Korea and North Korea. You pick a side and it really doesn't matter. Overnight you could switch the side if we all closed our eyes and ears and you switch the North Koreans and South Koreans together, it wouldn't make a damn difference. In fact, you would rather back North Korea because he's got a better grip on power. This is what you like of your colonies, of the areas that you push wars in. You hate those puppets that you put in who are not worthy of the job, and they fuck it up. Like Muhammad Reza Pahlavi was your puppet, and you really didn't like him because he couldn't pull it through. He couldn't pull it off. On the other hand, the Egyptian model is a great model because they show something. By the time these motherfuckers become generals, they show something that eventually you agree with one or the other taking over and staying in power till the end of their life. Because, they've shown something to become a general, as opposed to monarchies, but in which the replacement of the monarch is not, is not clear whether he can put 2 and 2 together, is worthy enough or not. Anyway, my point is this: as long as you back these puppet regimes who are not backed by their people, Egypt is not backed by their people. It's a puppet regime. Neither is Jordan, nor is Saudi Arabia, nor is Dubai. None of these countries are really, their leaders are backed by their people. They're more your puppets, more Uncle Sam's managers' puppets, these people, these leaders. And as long as that's the case, and as long as, forget about puppets, maybe puppets is tolerable, but then pushing the puppets to war in order to expand the empire, that's what means. That means that you have to have a police state on your own land. Why? Because many people identify with the shit show that's going on in Palestine, the shit show that is going on in Ukraine. Many people identify, but a lot of people, some people more than identify, because videos comes out, pictures comes out. The guy looks at the picture, he's Jordanian, he's Palestinian, he knows his roots are in Gaza, and picture or video, something comes out and he sees the picture and he's like, he or she is like, that looks just like my cousin. That is probably my cousin. So when you're, and very fewer will feel so ashamed that they will think they should do something about it in a peaceful place. Then that means you have to continue having the police state in order to prevent any of these guys who identify with people from there. We give you citizenship, and the only thing we ask is you shut up about our imperial exploitation and imperial adventures, well, many people will shut up, some will not, and if very few would be so appalled by how you're treating their cousins that they feel they should do something about it. What I'm trying to say is that in order to, I'm not for the police state, but as long as your policy of violence against local, providing funds and arms, especially arms, providing arms to some locals over there to fight against some other locals over there, as long as your policy is that, some of those locals relatives are in your land. In order to not bring violence home, you have to watch these people very carefully. That would be no fly list and no watch list and watch list this and watch list that and watch list the other, because you're creating a lot of casualty over there that some may identify with. Again, the solution is simple. You say, if you don't fund and arm Israelis or Ukrainians, the Ukrainian Slavs will, return back to other Slavs in Russia and sign peace treaty together and agree to stay in a cooperative, just like your cooperative of NATO. Russia feels they have enough weight that they feel they should have a cooperative with their neighboring country, which makes sense. Neighbors should have a cooperative pact. You had NAFTA, whether it's economic or financial, European Union. The Russians believe at least Ukraine should be in their union. Just like European has a union, Russia wants to have a union. Because it's just not Russia. Russia itself is made out of like 20 different ethnicities. We call it Russia, but Russian, those who are really identify as Russian, apparently they're 20% of the population, 30% of the population. Ethnic Russians. So there are big, a tent of ethnicities under Russian, just like there's a big tent of ethnicities under the European Union, just like there's big tent of ethnicities in Uncle Sam's land, in North America in general. There's a big tent of ethnicities. And Russia, again, it's not one ethnicity. And they believe for their survival of their whole group of ethnicities, which call themselves theoretically Russians, for that to be safe, they feel they should have some alliances within at least their next door neighbors. They share a border. So logically you would think that you would allow Russia to at least have some alliances around these borders, have good relationships and alliances around these borders. But you're expanding NATO. You're saying that fuck Russia. Russia should not have any alliances even on its own borders. Why? They're not communists anymore. What's wrong with Russians? Why can't they have a sphere of influence? Two great powers meet and they leave a line of countries between them who have good relationship with both sides. Not only Ukraine, but those three republics should be, if independent, fine, be at least in the sphere of influence of Russia, because they are on Russian border. They share a border. But this is it. This is the thing. This is all about money and what the boys in Wall Street consider their bonuses. So Russian blood and Ukrainian blood has to be shed, so the boys at the Wall Street hopefully can get a great bonus. First of all, they're getting great bonuses. Those who have arms manufacturer stocks, they're getting big bonuses. The rest of the Wall Street is just hoping to take some of that sweet raw resources in Ukraine, take profits. They don't touch the resources. How many Wall Street people dirty their hand with touching the fucking resource? No, just now we own the deed to Ukraine. Now here's a signature, go exploit this mineral in Ukraine and deposit the profits in our company, period. Again, Ukrainians are going to work, but their profits are going to end up in Wall Street. This is all Ukraine war is about. The boys in Wall Street need to expand the empire in order to justify 20% returns. End of story. And you're doing that in Ukraine and in Israel. It's all about expansion of the empire of the white boys in Wall Street. But you're sending funds and arms to them. If you're doing that, and you have a lot of ethnicities of that area that you're pounding with your arms and your funds, is pounding an area, but from that area you have a lot of ethnicities, people of the same ethnicity in your tent, in your tribe, on your land. Therefore you have to have a watch list of watch all of them, Muslim watch list, or now not a Muslim watch, an Arab watch list, because you're killing Arabs. None of my cousins live there because that's I'm from a different shit. Salute. None of my cousins live in there, but because they're Arabs. I'm not. But those Arabs have a lot of other Arabs who are, living in Europe and North America. Western Europe and North America. The places which are funding and supporting Israel. Who's doing the pounding on other Arabs? Let me put it this way. If I was the leader of Nigeria, and Nigeria had an empire, and I was the leader of that empire, and Nigeria was pounding some country in East Asia, like Vietnam, like Thailand, like China. If Nigeria was bombing China, bombing Thailand, bombing Cambodia, if Nigeria was doing that, Nigeria should have any Taiwanese, Thailandish, any of those ethnicities or any of those countries that you're bombing, you should be on a watch. You should have everybody from those countries within your tent on the watch list. Well, that's a police state, because it's just logical. Because if you're pounding them, you should be watching the rest of them. If you're pounding people of one tribe, you should be watching the rest of the tribe, especially the rest of the tribe that are in your land. So that requires a watch list. That means you have to have a police state. In other words, I'm trying to say, Mrs. Tulsi Gabbard, that you can't be an empire abroad and be pounding different ethnicities, or be supplying, not yourself, but you'll be supplying the funds and the arms needed to pound, so one group of natives can pound another group of natives. You're supplying one side. You can't do that and not have everybody on the other tribe on a watch list. The tribe that you're they're pounding of. You cannot pound the tribe and not have people from that tribe on the watch list. It was so bad that during World War II, the camps for the Japanese was basically the case. They thought it's too much having the man. Uncle Sam's managers could have actually put an agent on every Japanese family, or at least every Japanese male, put an agent on every Japanese male and be done with it. Quietly watch all of the Japanese during World War II, American citizen of Japanese descent during World War II. That was the expensive option. Put an agent for every family, make up files for every family, and keep every family out under watch, even though you allow them to be theoretically free, but you watch them all the time. It was too much expense, so they decided to round them up and put them in camps in Arizona. My point is this: that's the degree in which that's the point at which you really don't care about them. You put them in camps, just like supposedly the illegal immigrants that are you doing right now. My point is this: I am not for a police state, but because I'm not for a police state, I cannot be for an imperial model of a forceful real estate acquisition or forceful resource acquisition. You see, well, because I'm not for a police state, I cannot be for an imperial state of mind, and because I realize I cannot have an imperial mindset, then in order to not have to have an imperial mindset, I have to go to the boys at the Wall Street and tell them to get out. No more 20% bonuses. No more middleman in the Wall Street, period. All the companies, there is just research firms researching companies, but we get rid of all the big banks and big boys at Wall Street. But that's a revolutionary thought, and you're not there yet, because the poverty is not bad enough. That comes after. If you reach the point of poverty is too much, between the difference in livelihood between the haves and have-not reaches a point in which the system force you to come out of the imperial mindset, because imperial mindset benefits very few, and those few are the ones who hire these salesmen to be leaders. You see where I'm going with this? So the problem is you cannot in conclusion, you cannot get rid of the police state as long as you have imperial policies in place which feeds funds and arms into the war machine to expand the empire. And that policy is in place because that's the only way Wall Street can show double-digit profits, by expanding and exploiting more land, resources, populations, markets, whatever. As Mr. John Stewart says, it has been great for you for 80 years, peace and tranquility, but both your population and the rest of the world have suffered because of these imperial policies. And again, the next step of the suffering is going to be a very draconian police state. Doesn't matter how many of these watch lists you take off, eventually something bad happens that you have to bring them back and do an even better job of watching. Assign a drone for every citizen, or any jackass who happens to be living on your land, assign their own drone to watch them. That doesn't have to be the case. But as long as you stop the suffering, you see, that suffering that you cause over there, some people get emotional about the suffering that you're causing to their tribe. And out of that emotion comes a crazy reaction, like what recently happened in Colorado. You want to call the poor bastard terrorist, go right ahead. You want to put his family in front of firing squad, go right ahead. You have the power. But you're causing this. The reason he's getting emotional and taking action is because he keeps hearing and reading about how many people have the Uncle Sam's arms have been involved in elimination of how many of his cousins in West Asia, which is Arab land. And he's Arab. And he wonders, why should the Arabs be burned and white people not? That's a simple question. But you're saying that land doesn't have a rule. This land has a rule. We call the rules on this land, we call it the law. But that land is lawless because it's not our land. This is basically the gist of it. That's how you justify murders over there, but murders over here cannot be justified. That's how, in your mind, that's how you're partitioning it. Or the judge, that's how he or she is going to partition this matter in the courtroom. And say, there, meaning in Russia, in Ukraine, in Gaza, there is lawless. So committing acts of murder in the name of revenge is permitted because it's lawless. Committing acts of revenge, you see, imagine this Colorado guy is revenging his cousin from some Israelis or supporters of Israel. And why he's revenging? Because Israelis have revenged their own people on the Palestinians. But it's an unproportional revenge of eliminating a whole part of a country and replacing its population with other white people. So again, your policies of supporting that crazy idea of a white gated community in West Asia to keep the Arabs under your thumb, if you have to keep an empire together forcefully, you're not you're not familiar with the art of running an empire. If you have to put an empire to get together by force, because sometimes you are at the center of the empire, ma'am, believe it or not, Mrs. Gabbard. Sometimes, salute. Sometimes you're at the center of the empire and you're so competent, you run the empire so competently that the other countries want to be part of your empire. But competence is the key here. If you're not running your empire competently, you have to try to force people into your empire. And that means putting military bases on their land and shooting at anybody who doesn't agree with your military base on their land. Literally shooting at them. Killing any of the natives who don't agree with us, who just landed. Again, it's the same American colonial policy which won the West, now is trying to win the East. The cowboy policy never ended. It got the West, all North America. Now let's return to Asia and Africa. That's the same cowboy policy of, attack and plunder and shoot anybody who doesn't agree with you. And at the same time, you have during the years, some Arabs have settled in your land. Some Africans have settled in your land. Some Asians have settled in your land. Now the empire is at such a state that, everybody is under suspicion because the empire is attacking everybody. They're attacking the Chinese, they're attacking the Russians, and they're attacking the Arabs. You have in your land both Russians, Chinese, and Arabs. You demonize the Arabs on your land after 2000, Why 2000 happened? Because you didn't have a watch list. Why did you need to have a watch list in the year 2000? Because you have been pounding Arabs since 1948. Since 1948, setting up of Israel, you have been officially pounding Arabs. So Arabs are a little slow, but it took them from 1948 to year 2000 or 95 to some of them show some kind of a knee-jerk reaction to your colonial policies. It takes them a long time to react, but you see, it's a action and reaction. You've been pounding Arabs since when I say you, I mean Uncle Sam's manager. When I say Uncle Sam's manager, I mean the administration that one after each other were enticed into funding and arming Israel more and more based on some crazy religious idea or some crazy colonial idea that we white people need to have a foothold in West Asia, Arab land, in order to keep Arabs under our thumb. This is the geopolitical explanation of Israel. And Israelis are 90% white, very white. Jared Kushner white. And Ukraine, expansion of NATO up to the Russia's border proper. As long as you are funding and arming the pounding of many ethnicities around the world in order to expand the empire to benefit Wall Street, as long as you're doing that, you gotta have watch list. And as long as you're doing that is when the German chancellor comes in with the birth certificate of Mr. Trump and gives it to him, stating that yes, you see where your genetics are, you have to be with us against Russia. That's what bringing Trump's birth certificate by the Germans. That's what that meant. That you have to back us against Russians. Now the question is, who's winning and who's losing in the Russian case is basically, again, the European Wall Street and the American Wall Street are, holding their breath, hoping that things go the way of Ukrainians, so the empire expands and 80% of it, of course, goes to Wall Street and 20% ends up in London and Paris. 10% each. The Germans won't get shit. Salute. But this is the stupidity of the matter, is now the Germans have, hired an ex-lawyer, businessman, millionaire to run Germany, who is, he knows he's not going to be in the front line, neither his children are going to be in the front line. So talking tough when you think you're not going to be in the front line and the front line is not going to affect you is very easy. A slap in the face would cure it, but I kind of doubt anybody would do it. A slap in the face of these rich Germans who are vouching for war because they are hungry for Ukrainian resources, and now they've cut off from energy. Now they're hungry, period. My point, ma'am, none of us wants the police state. None of us wants the watch list. But as long as your policy is that, you gotta have a watch list. I can assure you, 3 months after stopping Ukraine and stopping, not arming, it's not your business. You don't arm. And when you don't arm, they have to fold. And when they fold, all that happens in Israel is they become integrated with the Arabs. If you don't have a bullet to shoot at the Arab comes closer and eventually passes you and goes about his business. This is what happens in Israel. The moment Uncle Sam's managers stop providing the bullets is the moment the Israelis cannot shoot at the Arabs, because apparently Israelis don't have self-control. Apparently the Ashkenazi have lost self-control. So as long as they're funded, they don't have self-controls, and they will keep shooting at the Arabs. As long as their money is given, and as long as you give them money and arms to shoot the Arabs, they will shoot Arabs. Because Ashkenazi have lost all control. Don't have much control apparently over their, I don't know, bloodlust. So unfortunately, this is the case. Now, if a group of, I mean, imagine a tribe from Papua New Guinea who are cannibals and like cannibaling people who are not of their tribe. Imagine if you keep sending them people or sending them better weapons to kill more people and eat them, they will do just that. Because apparently these people in Papua New Guinea don't have any inhibition against eating other people, other humans. So if you give them more sophisticated arms, they will kill more and eat more. So apparently Israelis don't have any inhibition against killing Arabs or killing anybody apparently. Israelis, the Ashkenazi, don't have any inhibitions with regards to killing other people. You know, the whole idea behind the chosen people means we are chosen by our God, but you're not. That makes us special. For a long time the Muslims were saying the same thing in my country. And I wasn't a Muslim, so basically they were saying that, you know, we are chosen as Muslims and you're not. And for a long time it was like this, and you know, I didn't like it. I had to get out. The whole idea is you don't want to live with a group of people that's, you know, that are, you know, different from you, but they also think not different but better. That's the problem in Israel, is that the Ashkenazi they don't think they're just different, they think they're better than the Arabs, and that's why they can easily kill Arabs. But my point is this: as long as you provide arms, ammunition and money for the Ashkenazi to continue killing Arabs, you gotta watch all the Arabs in your tent or around the world. And that would be considered the police state. Easier solution: stop funding Israelis. The Arabs will just come in and go about their business, and the Israeli society will become integrated. And those white Israelis which is the majority, who feel, you know, okay about living with the Arabs, next to Arabs, they will stay, and those who don't feel okay, they will leave. Just the same thing that happened in South Africa. Ashkenazis who feel Arabs are dirty, they will leave and go wherever other white people are, wherever they're comfortable. But the idea that these Arabs make Israelis uncomfortable, so in order to make Israelis feel more comfortable, we are going to eliminate the Arabs, get rid of the Arabs from their street, and then from their towns, and then from the country. And change the name of the country. Again, in short, as long as your policy is this, imperial, for the sake of Wall Street and profits, then the other side of the equation, you must have a police state. You must be watching everybody, because this is your policy, that you are decimating a lot of people. And anybody in your own population who identifies with those people that you're decimating, you're killing, you're murdering, those people who identify with them are may cause you problems. So you gotta have all of them on the watch list. You know, greed, you can say, creates a police state. On the other hand, greed that creates a police state, it has already done so to a large degree, because if you look at it, black people also are on the watch list in a way, by their local cops. And why? Because they have made to suffer in poverty and lack of health and poverty and all the problems that comes along with that. Crime. So black people in a way have always been on a watch list in North America. There's a solution to that. If you allow them to come out of poverty, whatever means possible, whether it's universal basic income or whatever it takes. These are people of your tribe. Every member of your tribe has to be proud of being a member of the tribe, or else they're going to be trouble for you. So the solution with university protests is not to lock them up and scare the shit out of them, is to change policy. If these people are protesting, that means they are not happy to be part of your tribe. See why they're not happy to be part of your tribe, and see if you, by change of policy, you can make them happy to be part of your tribe. Nobody says, do anything bad to the Israelis. Just don't arm them and tell them that they have to integrate with the Arabs. End of story. We are not going to arm you and help you keep on killing. So the other solution, integration with the native Arab population. If you have problem with that, get out of Asia. If you don't like to mix with Arabs, you shouldn't be living on the Arabian Peninsula. Mrs. Tulsi Gabbard. I lived in India for 3 years. The idea was, if I didn't like mixing with Indians, I shouldn't have gone to India. You see where I'm going with this? If the Ashkenazi don't like to mix with the Arabs and accept that they're going to be in a minority because the place is called Arabian Peninsula, if the Ashkenazi have a problem with that, mixing with Arabs, then Ashkenazi should leave Arabian Peninsula, because it's called Arabian Peninsula. If they don't have a problem with mixing with Arabs, then declare a secular state and all men are welcome and start living together. That's if you stop, because you see, Ashkenazi apparently don't have self-control. As long as you provide them with weapons, they will shoot whoever comes across their gun, apparently. And now you have problems at home. You have to put everybody on a watch list. You don't want to do that. I don't want you to do that. But you can't fund assassins over there who are assassinating Russians and Arabs, and then not expect the Russians and Arabs in your tent from having any kind of reaction to that. They're murdering Russians and they're murdering Arabs with your guns. You expect these folks, all of them, to go about their business? Of course they won't. Some of them will not. Some mostly will, those who are affected mostly will protest. But if you would, take it further, you can't blame them. But your only defense of that is trying to say that no, this land is run by laws, that land is not. So if you want to get killed or be killed or kill others. You go to that land is lawless. We, the Uncle Sam's managers, have decided to declare that land lawless in Israel and therefore and in Ukraine. Therefore you can shoot. We have given permission for some people to shoot at Arabs in this land, and we provide the arms to some people to shoot the Russians in that land. Of course you have to have Arabs on the watch list. Of course you have to have Russians on the watch list. Of course you have to have the Chinese on the watch list. You're pushing a war against China. In South China Sea. In the sea that is named after them. It's sort of like you coming to my yard and challenging me to a duel. That's how Uncle Sam's warships in South China Sea should be looked at. It's sort of you're going to China's yard and you're what? You're courting China's wife and you're courting China's girlfriend in China's yard. That's how Chinese see you courting Taiwan, you courting Japan, you courting Filipino. These are all should be under this, for a peaceful world, these all should be under the sphere of influence of China. China is the greater mass. This is physics. A greater mass grabs a smaller mass and they rotate like the planets in a, not in a destructive way. You're living on a planet that is under the sphere of influence of the sun. So being under the sphere of influence because of proximity is physics, it's natural. Ukraine, Belarus, and those three Scandinavian, those three Estonia, Latvia, those three should be under the sphere of influence of Russia. You've got a greater mass, and the smaller mass around it should be in productive relationship with the greater mass that they are interacting with, i.e. sun and the planetary system around it. This is natural, this is physics. But you're saying that no, United States is such a great mass that, that our satellite, Ukraine, can be considered as our satellite. That Ukraine shouldn't be a Russian satellite. Taiwan shouldn't be a Chinese satellite. Palestine should not be an Arab satellite. We changed its name to Israel, so now Israel is has to be our satellite because Uncle Sam has such a great mass that it demands such a faraway satellites. That's a crazy way to look at it, because then basically you're saying the Chinese are nothing but shit and the Russians are a gas station with nuclear weapons, and that's it. These are the two biggest ones, and I'm going to teach both of them a lesson. Again, physics, even two black holes, when they mingle, both of them creates one. But imagine the kind of destruction that a binary black hole creates. Black hole itself, as it is a very destructive force, which happens to be the same description of large empires if they are run unwisely. And you see, the problem with the black hole, that is the same problem that happens to large empires, is that you become too greedy. The problem with the black hole is too greedy. It's pulling everything in, not giving anything out. The sun is right at the right amount, is giving something out. Therefore, there is a possibility to have life because of the giving that the sun does. But once the sun turns into a black hole, it just takes. That's I guess the difference between medium-sized empires and the large-sized empires. That medium-sized empires, they give some, like the Marshall Plan, even though for selfish reasons, but still there's some giving going on. But when the star gets too big, it turns into a black hole and won't give out shit. Therefore, the empire, the black hole, although it has such a great mass, although the empire is so wealthy, but then still the presidents of the empire want to collect more money from the peripheries, as the case was with Burisma, and is as the case is with the Arabs and Ashkenazi, and the AIPAC and Israel supporters are basically feeding this insatiable appetite for money that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, these rich people who are already rich, have such an insatiable aptitude for money that the Israelis keep feeding that, and therefore directing policies, feeding this election show, very expensive show. No, please, ma'am, with all due respect, please don't take away these watch lists, because you haven't changed your policies. Your expansionist imperial policies on behalf of Wall Street, as long as that's not changed, you better have the watch list, because it becomes a vicious cycle. You take away the watch list, something like 9/11 happens, then not only the watch list comes back, but also that will justify more expansion of the empire. That problem keeps benefiting the Wall Street. You see what I'm saying? You take away the watch list, something bad is going to happen by those people you're abusing overseas, and not only the watch list will come back, but also more military expression of the empire will cost a lot of more lives on the other side of the planet. The sane solution: say no to the Wall Street, send them all to farming in Oklahoma. Nobody should expect 20% return a year. Nobody should expect 2% return a year. 0.5% return on their money a year should be good enough. That will result into no more expansionist policies. There is no reason. There is nobody lusting after Ukrainian minerals and Palestinian land. Nobody's getting rich off selling arms to the Ashkenazi, and the Ashkenazi in Israel and Ashkenazi in Ukraine. Nobody gets rich off of that. Then you don't need to have a watch list. If you stop the suffering in other places on this planet, you don't need to have a watch list at home. Imagine, let me put it in a way that the folks at the back of the class gets it. Imagine you're trying to run a household. Imagine you have a son who's dating a girl that he likes. Now imagine, as a father, at the same time you have to, you're the landlord of that girl. Imagine that you're have to check out that girl from the apartment that you own, because that girl, in your view, is not worth that place. That would be the Arabs not being worth living on their land. And you, at the same time, you say, I don't need to watch my son. He's going to continue respecting me and looking up to me, although I am making his girlfriend homeless. You see what I'm saying? It's so you're telling your son not to care about his girlfriend. You're telling the Arabs and the Russians and the Chinese on your land to not to care about the Arabs and the Russians and the Chinese that you're making suffer. It's a bit much to ask. They will be affected by your forceful suffering of them. They will be affected, and therefore it's a no-brainer to have them on a watch list. And probably Plantier in that case becomes useful. You see, because of one problem, now you're going down a very dark path. The problem started with the boys at the Wall Street wanting to expand their territory. You stop that, we can all go about our business, and you don't have to have a police state. If you don't suffer, facilitate the suffering of anybody in this world, you really don't have to. You don't have to be on the lookout. You don't really have to be worried if you really don't cause much suffering in this world. Imagine, if you're a Sufi, or imagine if you're a Jain, somebody who believes that nobody should suffer. Does a Sufi or a Jain or a monk, do they have to watch their back often or have people on watch list? No, they don't. Because they haven't made anybody suffer. And they are humble and grateful for what they have, and they're not asking for more all the time. They don't have to have a watch list. But, the richest guy in town, he has to have watch list because he's made a lot of people suffer. That's why he got rich. Again, this just doesn't happen naturally. You don't become wealthy naturally. You take the productivity of a lot of people and don't compensate them relative to their productivity, and you keep some of their productivity for yourself, and therefore you become rich. I'm sorry, ma'am. As long as your policies are as such, you must have watch lists. In fact, you don't have enough watch lists. You should have assigned a drone to every person living within your tent to watch them. Just makes sense.